You can't go paddling and not have stories. So I have lots of stories. Some of them I embarrass my friends, and some of them I embarrass me. But yeah, you guys are really close to heaven. Gates of the Mountains, as you'll see it. I was there all of 8 hours, of which I probably slept 7, and I still wanted to go back. So when I wasn't seeing it from that end. So we'll get going. The folks will roll in. So yeah, we're going to talk about Gates of the Mountain up on the Missouri out by Helena. And usually I'm giving this with my buddy Chuck, but I took these guys up, my son and some friends, to share. So most of you know, because most of you are now my family, you can't paddle the Missouri River and not gain family. But in June of 22, I started out at Three Forks, Montana, and I paddled down to the Gulf of Mexico. 4 months, 126 days. I hate camping. I got really good at it. Sandbars are really fun. Out of this 3,800 miles, the Gates of the Mountains was the best. It is the jewel. And there are wonderful places all along this trip. But I said, I am going back. 2 years ago, I ended up with bypass surgery, which kind of screwed the whole summer up. The doctors don't let you paddle after they open you up. I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense. So I had to delay this a year. I live in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And so it is a 17-hour jaunt. It is much closer for all you, so none of you have excuses. You need to go up. You can see the trip there. You go up to Helena. That's where we kind of base camped out of night. Chuck and Lynn came in, Glenn and his son Luke, and then myself and my son, we all met there. You go up to the Marina. There's a wonderful marina with a ton of history there from that. The real good thing is we spent my son and I, another 3 weeks in Montana, just seeing river angels and friends and going back and seeing things I didn't get to see since I was stuck in a boat in 22. And Jim Emanuel and Norm Miller of the Missouri group, they lent us 3 canoes. I did not want to drag a canoe all over Montana for the rest of this trip. Plus, anything we bring out of Iowa, in Montana, thank goodness, is trying to make sure that they don't bring in invasive species. Guess what Iowa's in? The top category for having invasive species. Eurasian milfoil is in a lot of our lakes, and we're trying to keep that out of going other places. So by the generosity of Jim and Norm, they got us 3 canoes, and that worked out really, really well. So here's the gates. This is going north, south on the bottom, north up there. You got to remember the Missouri River flows towards Canada for a while, which my friends got all messed up trying to figure that out. The river basically cuts its way through one heck of a chunk of rock. And you can see, there it is. There's the river. There's only about 8 miles here that it goes through, and it is the most amazing chunk of ground you've ever seen. This is what it looked like in 1900. I got a hold of Norm. We found this picture. Again, when I boat, one of the things I want to do is see history, and you're going to hear a bunch of history here from Lewis and Clark and then the fire guys. I want you to look over at this tree right here. See that tree? There's my picture in 22. Water's a little higher because it's dammed up now. Guess who's still here? The tree. So the only way into Gates, there is no roads, none. You get in there 2 ways. You boat in or you hike in. It has extensive hiking trails. There are trails everywhere in here. Wonderful trails. You're going to see several of them. Or you can boat in. They do have tour boats going through about 3 times a day, 4 times a day. But it's a lot of fun. I had to squeeze this down, so there's going to be a few errors there. But Lewis and Clark talk about this in their journals, and Lewis talks about they got in late afternoon. The granite cliffs just had them in awe. That's why he called it the gates. It looked like they were going through a gate into something. It took them a while. They had been into this. They didn't get camping until near dark time, and right where they camped is called Meriwether Camp area, and they've got a bronze plaque there you can see. It's really, really cool. It does cut through what they call the Madison Group Formation. Most of this rock is 330 to 345 million years old. It is, if you're a geologist, this place is just, it's a zoo. There's all sorts of cool things to go see when you go through. Now, if you were listening closely, I said Lewis went into the gates of the mountain. Clark didn't go in. Clark never saw them because Clark went off looking. He and part of the group, and if I remember right, so York, Joe Field, and John Potts and Clark went overland before they got to the gates. And they were looking for the Shoshone or the Snake Native American tribes to try to work a deal for horses and do some stuff. They ended up meeting back above gates with Lewis. But what was funny is in Clark's journals, he talks about pulling 17 spines out of his feet from prickly pear. And I learned this the easy way. You don't go just running around anywhere in Montana in boating shoes or hiking shoes for that matter. And so they complained, Clark complained a lot about just the terrain. They called it flint, but it's the Madison Group rocks. Very sharp, very abrasive, and then prickly pear. And you can imagine at this point of the trip, they've been out on the river for months. And so whatever shoes they start out with out of St. Louis, they're toast at this point. Now, one of the cool, again, I love history. So one of the cool things is one of the more famous members of Lewis and Clark is John Colter. Now, John Colter was arguably probably the best backwoodsman they had in the group. When they needed meat, John Colter went out and shot buffalo and elk. He brought in a lot of stuff. Lewis met him, if I remember right, does they say where? Somewhere along the Ohio was down when they met up, and Clark offered him $5 a day. That was good pay back then. I'm sorry, $5 a month is what they were earning. So he drafted Coulter. This was a military expedition, so he hired in as a private. That means you have to follow military rules. Coulter was a little bit of a wild person. Apparently he and a couple guys went and got into some whiskey and things got wild. And then it was John Ordway was the sergeant, and apparently the sergeant and private Coulter didn't get along real well, and they were going to court-martial him, but everybody made up and shook hands, and so he ended up coming along the trip. And it's a good thing he did, because he saved their butt a couple times. Again, he knew how to hunt. He knew how to be in the backwoods, especially up when they were near the Nez Perce. He was able to bring in deer and things to help with talking with the native tribes and work through that. So he really played a big role. But he's the only one that didn't stay with the expedition up and back. He went all the way to the Pacific coast and came back. But when they got up to the Mandan villages at Bismarck, there at Mandan, he asked to be, if he could be let go. He wanted to go back up with a couple guys to do trapping and things. So Lewis and Clark honorably discharged him. He got 35 months and 26 days of back pay, a whole $179. Now, it didn't seem like much, but apparently back then that was good money. So, I mean, he was the only one that they let loose. He went back out with Forrest Hancock and Joe Dixon, and they did a lot of trapping. In 1870, you can remember 1807. 1806 is when Lewis and Clark made their way back down. 1807, Coulter spent up in the Yellowstone Grand Tetons. Most people, at least most historians, believe he's one of the first ones to see first white man to see that part of the country. And what's more remarkable, I think what's really cool, because he ended up back down at Fort Raymond in 1808, but that whole winter by himself with no guides, he's running around this area. Minus 30. I need way more than a hammock quilt to survive that at this point. So he did, in his descriptions and things he had told people later on, Jackson Hole, Grand Tetons, Wind River Range. So he covered a lot of this ground. Now, one of the more famous stories is what happens to him and John Potts up on, was it the Madison? think it was Jefferson. He was up on the Jefferson. And again, John Potts was in the Lewis and Clark. They were up there trapping beaver, and they ran into the Blackfeet. And the Blackfeet never accepted the incursion of white settlers into this area. They constantly pushed back. And so Coulter and Potts are out there in the middle of the river dealing with beaver trap. They're basically surrounded by a hunting party of Blackfeet, and they wait for them to come in. Well, Coulter at least had a brain. He came in. Potts took one shot and then turned into a porcupine. They filled him with arrows, dead on the spot. They took Coulter, they stripped him down, made fun of him, pushed him around, beat him up a little bit. You can imagine backstreet alley kind of thing. And they said, okay, we're done with it. You go ahead and go. You can take off. Well, what they were doing is they gave him a head start, and then the young braves were going to run him down and kill him. So he took off running. He knew exactly what was going to happen. There was no trick here that he was thinking they were going to let him go. He was good. He outran everybody but one brave. The one brave caught up to him and was so out of breath he stumbled. Coulter grabbed his spear and killed him, grabbed his blanket, and then took off again. He spent the night in a beaver lodge underwater up in the den while the rest of the tribe was looking for him. Never found him. It took him 8 days to walk. This says 11, I've heard 8. He had to walk barefoot, naked other than this blanket, to the nearest trading post for a week. No shoes, no nothing. I don't know how he did it. But that, you hear versions of that. This is a memorial to John. John ended up settling in New Haven, Missouri. And those that have paddled the river know New Haven real well because Gary and Lance have Astor glass down there. And as a paddler, you have to go in and sign the wall, blow a glass ball. So New Haven's a real special spot for a lot of us that have paddled the river. But John Colter is their favored son. And John had his family there. He had a young son that died as a young kid, and so he's buried there. So John's remaining years were there. This rock came out of somewhere near Helena. Those that remember Jim and Phyllis, the river angels, who used to take us around Great Falls, because you don't want to paddle through Great Falls. Jim was able to get this rock and get it etched, and then they had it moved down from there and put in. So it's really neat when you hear the gang Dave talk about, we're all connected by the river. The guys that portaged me around arranged for this rock to be down when I got to see it again 2 months later. John was buried, they say, in a bluff overlooking the Missouri. Rumor is that the railroad came in and blew up the bluff, and the grave was lost. My friends in New Haven just say, well, that's one thing you can believe. So apparently John is still buried in New Haven, just at a non-disclosed location because he's one of their famous residents. They didn't want all the hoopla going on. So that's the history. That's the Lewis and Clark and Coulter history I wanted to throw at you. Now we're going to throw a whole bunch of pictures at you. So this is the Marina where we put in. It is unbelievably convenient. For $5 a day, you can leave your car there. It's well protected. You don't worry about anything. You can see Lynn and Chuck here in the closest hopping in their boat, Glenn and Luke up front. It's about a 3-mile paddle into where we camped. We caught a beautiful day, like anything on the Missouri. If the wind comes up, you better have some whitewater skills because it can get rough. But we went in midday, about noonish. As you can see, beautiful day to be on the water, hardly any waves. The cliffs are magnificent. They are just, there's 1,000 foot of granite here. Picture on the left is my second most favorite picture of the ones we took. Sun beating off everything. Camera was going crazy. There's another half to this presentation where Chuck does the fauna. Chuck's a naturalist. So we talk about all the flowers and bugs and animals we saw. As we come around this corner, Mama Otter and her 2 kits are in the water, and they don't like canoes at all. So they scrambled back into the wall where they had a cave. So we quietly pulled in there. I'd whistle, and the 2 kids would pop up, want to see, and Mom would shove them back down. So we aren't even in the gates, and we're already seeing some really cool wildlife. So we paddle in. This is my friends coming in. This is the campground. And of course, it's John Colter Campground. That's where he stayed. The Meriwether camp is about a half mile downstream of this, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. The reason this is wonderful, one, when I rolled in here, about 3 miles upstream, I flipped. It's the only time in 4 months I flipped my boat over. And the reason being, it has a skeg, and I'm used to boats not having rudders and skegs. And there was this pelican sitting on a log. And I thought, I'm getting a picture of this. And as I'm taking the picture, that skeg goes right into the mud and rolls me over. And when I came up and fluttered and looked, pelicans stare there still. So I don't like pelicans. They're nasty creatures. They flip boats. But I rolled into here wet. It was late. I got dried out. Sun went down. Sun came up and I left. That was the extent of me seeing this. And it made such an impression I had to go back. This is great. They have bear boxes. They have a pit toilet. We're going to talk about one other thing in like 3 slides. But this isn't my version of camping. This is like luxury camping. I mean, you don't have to dig any holes and everything else. We did have to bring water, and I'll talk about water. But we rolled in. Normally, there is nobody, and I mean nobody in this campsite. There's 7 spots. There's a few more. We rolled in. There was people there all weekend. A family came out on Sunday. We rolled in on a Friday. We rolled out on a Monday morning. And they said, there's never anybody here. I don't know why everyone's here, but great place to camp. I will say you can scrounge firewood as long as it's on the ground. Bring a saw. Breaking over rocks is not the easiest thing to do. This picture covers the highs and lows of the trip. That's the crew on the right. It was fun to share this experience with my son, my adult son. He's standing up, and then Chuck's there taking the picture. Just fun to take friends out to something that was as meaningful. On the left, that is the water pump. And in 22, I went through and I had all my water bags were filled. I didn't need water, but I stopped. I wanted to drink. Took 1 drink out of that pump, went back to my campsite, dumped all my water out and filled it up. You can imagine the aquifer this comes out of. It is the way water used to taste. It's the way I remember camping in northern Minnesota and the water and no iron. This was just the sweetest water. They had the handle. You do see a handle on this pump? There's no handle on that pump. It's because they, by law, have to test it once a month, and they didn't have staff to test. So if I'd have known that, I'd have brought a handle because I know the water is good. But we had to haul our own water in, so we couldn't take it. So that was the most disappointing thing is you got bear boxes and a pit toilet and toilet paper, and you should have had water. We didn't have water. We did make a schedule. We knew we were going to do some hiking, but essentially I told everybody just, like Josh and Lynn there, you just sit down and just enjoy you read books. It was a gorgeous place to be. We did eat much better than I did in 22. We weren't eating out of bags. I mean, we had so we made it where my son and I were cooking one night, Glenn and his son were cooking one night, and Lynn and Chuck were cooking one night. So we brought along the Dutch oven because, it's luxury camping. I can put a cast iron Dutch oven in the canoe. I needed weight anyway. And so we cooked up. We had gorgeous suppers. There's the night we did pork roast. Normally on my trip, I was eating Mountain House, and that's what we ate the rest of the time for lunches or breakfast. I asked my son, did he really say plan on getting Happy Camper beer? Apparently that was just an accident, but we were drinking Happy Camper beer while we were there. Again, since this is luxury camping, it's nice to have a couple fingers of whiskey at night watching the sun go down. If you notice, there's something here and there's something here. You're not supposed to have a cork in the bottle at that point. Now, Josh, you can see on the right, volunteered if we couldn't finish the bottle, he'd help out so we could not take it back empty. But the cork busted off when I was trying to open it. But we were able to finish it in 3 days. That worked out really nice just to sit back. This is the picture on the left especially. That is not 2 pictures superimposed. That is the sun going down off the east wall and our campfire. Josh and Chuck stayed up that night and just caught some amazing photographs. I look at that left picture and think someone's photoshopped those 2 together. That's just the way it turned out. It was amazing. Again, you sit around all day. We did a lot of sitting and reading. And this is what Dave brought up. You notice on the right, that's Natalie and Mikey, or Nat and Mike, I think it was Saturday night. And it was late. It's probably 5, 6 o'clock. I look out and I see a canoe come downstream. And for those that have been through paddlers or river angels and helped through paddlers, you just look at a boat and go, that's through paddlers. You look at their gear and their setup and what's hanging all off it. And I looked out and said, this is August 9th. And I'm thinking, that can't be through paddlers. They just must be really going to have fun camping. So I went about my business. Chuck went down and greeted them. And there's some you saw in one of the photos, there's some nice, really boat docks there, but there's a nice beach where the canoes can come in. So Chuck brought them around, and I hear Chuck down there, Dave, you're not going to believe this. There's some people you got to meet. Nat and Mike met up, and the story, that's why boating people are so cool. They flew in from Great Britain, landed in Denver, by sheer luck ran into Evan Garcia's father, who has an outfitting store somewhere in Colorado. Evan Garcia is a big whitewater paddler and filmmaker, so I know Evan, I don't know his dad. His dad hooked them up with a canoe and all the gear they needed, and they put on the river 3 days before this. Day 2, they flipped, got out, put everything out on the sandbars. They hadn't yet discovered Ziploc bags, but after that they did. They rolled in, and it's like, what are you guys doing for water? Well, we thought we'd pick up water as we went down the river. I spent 3 hours doing a data dump. They're drinking out of a fire hose, but I said, you need to worry about this, you need to worry about this, I will email you, because Nat still had coverage on her cell phone. I will email you the River Angel list. I will get you all the data points I have off my database from that. They hadn't been in the canoe more than 3 days. So when they left, we filled them up with water on Sunday, because we had plenty of water with us. That was one of the problems. A lot of people saw, I did my presentation here a couple years ago. Everyone was counting on getting water here because of that pump. And suddenly this year we couldn't do it. So a little bit of inconvenience for the people through. But Nat had never seen cooking in aluminum foil. So it was the first American aluminum foil cooking meal she ever had. So we invited them, filled them full of food, and just had a blast. And as Dave said, they made it down to Burns Point on the Gulf, went through the Atchafalaya, decided that wasn't good enough. They paddled back up the intercoastal waterway, paddled out all the way to New Orleans, and partied in New Orleans. Right now they are backpacking their way to California, or hitchhiking their way to California. They didn't know what whitewater rapids were. They were going to go below Great Falls, down through Mahoney Rapids, just paddling. Thank goodness Norm got a hold of them and said, you need to line your canoes around. They didn't know what a barge and towboat were on the Mississippi. You don't want to end up under one of those. So there for a while, we were taking bets they were going to die. It sounds morbid, but it's just like, but what an adventure. Just, we're going to get it. Because Mikey had read Huck Finn. Even globally, Huck Finn is a book that people read. And he always thought, let's take a raft on the Mississippi. Well, this was their version. They got on at Three Forks, they went on down. So great to meet them, a lot of fun. We did a lot of hiking. As you can see, this is one of the trails. We had people that would hike into Coulter and leave the next day. So it's just part of a very extensive trail system. Lots of pictures. Glenn and Luke on the left, my son and Glenn on the right. And as you climb, these views get amazing. Josh told you to tell everybody, I was supposed to tell everybody, see, he learned how to fly on this trip. If you look real close, there's a railing right here. So he's not flying, but he'd like you to all think that. So he got to fly around the canyon a little bit. Again, I have learned the easy way that just because it's a year departed from open heart surgery, you do not have all the strength you think you had. I quit counting at 45 switchbacks. This trail is great, just crazy. So we took frequent breaks, because I'd go so far and said, unless you want to call in at search and rescue, we're going to stop and I'm going to breathe for a while. Not a hard trail, just a very steep trail. Really cool fire, and we're going to talk about fire here at the end. But fire is part of the ecosystem up here. You could see the latest fire, which I believe was 2018, 2019, went through and changed part of that. Here's the #1 picture that the group took. I've already sent that out to be turned into a puzzle. All the shadow and the lines and the sun and just someone took a picture, and it just beautiful picture of what we were seeing. Yeah, my son's a clown. He likes the camera. Again, you could see evidence along the trail what fire has done and changed that ecosystem is just part of its natural evolution. It was cool to see the river from these heights. And as you go up, you just keep seeing more of the river, and you're looking south. I had to tell my mates several times, the river flows north, not south for a while. You just got to get yourself set. Again, hiking along the trail, just amazing shots. It's just so cool up there. And we got to the top, and this was the trail that comes off Meriwether Access, and we go up there. Is about, I think, 3,000 feet of elevation. We'll get to the top. It's on the north side of Mann Gulch, and we're going to talk about Mann Gulch. The neat thing here is, I don't know of anybody else, but I'm learning Spanish on Duolingo. I've done it now for 1,176 days. I'm over 3 years. There's no cell coverage down at the river. What am I doing right over here in this picture? I'm doing my Spanish lesson for the day. So I kept my streak going. It worked out well. One of the fun things, again, I love history. And so Mann Gulch is here. It is just down from, it was about a mile from camp, about half mile from the Meriwether Access. This was one of the first fire jumper tragedies that we had as a U.S. history. Lewis and Clark wrote about this, but there was a fire in 1949. The ground ranger, James Harrison, reported it. And so they brought in a smoke jumping crew. Back then, we thought that we needed to contain fires. And now the whole thinking has changed to what fire means to the ecology and things of the area. So they jumped in 15 people. And I'm gonna jump over. I'll hit this real quick. I'm jump to a picture. But they got caught off guard massively. 13 of the 15, 13. Yeah, well, 12 of the jumpers perished. 3 of them did not. And then the ground-based firefighter, James Harrison, he also lost his life. 2 of them survived by getting up this ridge, and one of them, Wag Dodge, he lit a burn fire around him, which is something they hadn't been taught. He just thought it made sense. And so after that, it's incorporated into training. But this is Mann Gulch. And where I showed you where we hiked on Saturday, we were on this ridge. We were on the north side looking at the south-facing ridge. They jumped in here, excuse me, hooked up, went down, and then once they got down there, they realized they had a problem. And the fire had switched on them. Their biggest problem is their radio was destroyed when they jumped. The radio, normally they have a radio, they can talk to base. When they all got on the ground, the radio's parachute didn't work. And you know what happens when parachutes don't work. Some of the things that made Mann Gulch really, really bad is the steep slope. And you think about it, and you'll see here, but it's like, couldn't they outrun this? And that's one of the reasons to go to history, go to where things happen, because I'll show you a picture. I fully understand now why they couldn't outrun this fire. Very, very steep slopes, much more steep than one would imagine. It was full of cheatgrass. Cheatgrass will it likes to turn on the fire right now. And so this whole valley was ready to go up. Again, they lost their radio, so they couldn't talk to anybody about what was going on. They thought the wind was going south. The wind was going north. It was blowing upriver into the valley, which is what fueled this. And then it was a really dry part of the year. So for some of you that, if you don't get the chance, at least read Norman Maclean's book, Young Men and Fire. He wrote about this. The book is really in a couple different pieces. The first part is he talks about just the history and what happened. He was also able to get with Sorley and the other survivor, and they went back to it. He walked the site with 2 of the survivors. This was not a good look for the fire service. There was a lot of lawsuits. Wag Dodge caught a lot of crap. It was just rough. It was a rough time for the firefighting. The usual conspiracy theories and things like that. As time has gone on, it's all squared itself up. But Norman Maclean, he also wrote A River Runs Through It. So if you've read that, this book is just as good. I went through it fast. I'm going to go back through it again. But he was able to interview the 3 people that survived. They walked and did some things and looked at it. So I highly encourage that. This is where we hiked on Saturday, and this is looking at across to the south facing where the fatalities happened. The Forest Service has a really nice placard up there. This is the ridge, what they were trying to get to and get over, and 2 of the 15 made it. They have an outstanding memorial there for the firefighters, really classy and well done. So you paddle down there. Here's the trailhead for that. Easy to get to. I was not up for 45 more switchbacks. So this was supposed to be an easy day. It's only 1,000 feet of elevation. You're going up a creek bed. How hard can it be? This was something I didn't know, and I don't know if it's in the book or not, but Dr. Harry Gisborne from the Forest Service went up about 3 months after the incident. He wanted to understand what had happened. He wanted to see the terrain for himself. Why did not their tactics or training, what let them down? What could be improved? There is a memorial there for him. He went up there, spent all day. He was not in good health. He had had heart attacks before, got all his notes written up, talked to his coworkers, and dropped over dead. So he was the 15th person that died as part of the Mann Gulch fires. But all his notes and stuff made a huge difference in future on how the firefighters would attack a problem, what some of the issues were. So it was real neat to be there as part of that history. So you're going to climb with me. You start on the left, and then we go to the right, and then we start on the left, and we keep going on the right. And it just keeps going up. And they had, the firefighters carried an 80-pound pack, which about at some point, they all pitched. They knew they had to get rid of that and move. At the top of this is all the farther I got. I couldn't go any farther. Most of the crosses are up here. Most of the crew got this far. This was one of the first firefighters to fall. They're all trying for this ridge. And once you're on that ground and climb it, you can see what they were up against and why it was such a tragedy, why they just could not run the fire with all the other conditions. So amazing place, a lot of fun, neat history to go and be part of. And that is the end of my presentation. That's New Haven with a rainbow, New Haven, Missouri, where John Colter is buried, just we don't know where. So with that, thank you for your attention, and I've got a few minutes for questions if you've got them. I put you all to sleep. And I'm hard of hearing, so yell at me.
Okay, I've been up there, and you know where the boats launch there for the tour?
At the Marina, yep.
Is that where you put in?
Yeah, that is, if I zing all the way back, this is, don't go too far. That is the Marina on the left. And they are awesome. You can fill up with water, $5 a day, leave your car back. It's a protected spot. I don't know if they rent boats, but it is a great place to trailhead out of from a water trail.
Yeah, and I don't have an idea of distance. It's not all that far, but to the camp, what would you say?
Well, I told all my fellow travelers it's just a mile. It's about 2.5, maybe 3. And the only reason they didn't shoot me is when we got to the campground is like the sights were so spectacular. We saw otters at the very first cliff wall. There were ducks everywhere. So we have another 45 minutes of all the fauna and flora that we saw. I'll give away one since you guys won't see it, and if I do this a few more years. But on Sunday, when we got to the Mann Gulch hike and at that trailhead, right behind the sign, there's an apple tree. Okay, apple trees aren't native to Montana. And I pulled an apple off it. It's Granny Smith. Well, you know where that apple tree came from. So, and this tree is probably 15 years old. So it is interesting looking at that tree, the perspective of what do we change we don't realize by interacting with the environment? What could we change or not change? I'm so used to seeing like that tree there of the picture from 1900 versus what I did in 22. Tree was still there. It looked like nothing had changed, yet there are subtle changes all around the park, and that was just one. Here's an apple tree. Someone, we always joke, I always take banana peels when I'm out duck hunting, and I plant banana trees in Iowa. Well, darn it, no banana trees ever grown yet, but I keep trying. But just that innocent of throwing the apple core turned into a tree 15 years later. And I don't think the person who tossed it ever thought that might happen that way. So interesting in how we interact with the environment. But yeah, 3 miles in, 3 miles out. The only thing gets rough is if that 3 miles, if the wind was out of the south, that could be a rough paddle. We had gorgeous weather the whole time. It was fantastic. And you don't need water. I would call the Forest Service first. I would still bring some water. But if you had to paddle in to get water and paddle back out, it wasn't that far. In fact, Lynn forgot her sleeping bag. So they paddled back after they got the camp all set up and took another hour and a half a round trip just to have some fun. And the weather was not nearly as nice as when we went out. Other questions?
I'm confused. I'm sorry.
We'll go here and then I'll go to you next, Jim. Yeah.
What other canoeing is there in and around that area?
So you can canoe down to the south. The river's fairly wide in there. There's a lot of boat traffic. It's heavily fished because of the marina. But if you just want to do a day trip, that and then have the river pull you back down, you could do that. We saw maybe 5 or 6 groups in 3 days paddle through the gorge. They were camping farther down. I know that you can take out down below. There's no roads in there, but you could make a day trip or multiple trips. For us, it was easy to go to Coulter, ground zero, do some hiking, do some paddling. Chuck even did some fishing. He had his Montana fishing license. He did catch a fish. We had fresh fish the last night. That was amazing too. So, but yeah, I think it'd be, if you're just looking for a day or 2 trip, this is an ideal place to set up, and just most everyone here has done those kind of trips. It is in and out. I thought was just amazing with all the facilities that were there. Jim?
Well, that's what I was going to ask. How much current is there?
None. Your big worry is wind. Like any of us that have done the Missouri, the reservoirs are the worst, but there is enough open water here, and all that wind funneling down those cliffs. That is, it's only 6-8 miles of solid rock, but it funnels everything. So when the wind kicks up, we left Monday morning, about 4 a.m. Monday morning. My tent's half on its side. There's 35 mile an hour winds blowing down the gulch that you camped in. And I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be fun when we have to paddle out. And the sun came up and all the wind went away, just stopped. So I don't know if the sun changed the atmosphere, but yeah, you worry about wind. Yes, there's boat traffic. I wouldn't be up there on the 4th of July. I wouldn't be up there on Labor Day. I wouldn't be, that marina is heavily, heavily used. But, we went August specifically to miss some of the kids are back in school and things like that. But it is, even with the boat traffic, all the boats were very respectful. Most of the boats either moved out of the way or came down off wake and past us. So just a lot of fun to paddle up there and hike. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you.